You probably are all aware that what we do here on a Sunday, we record and we put lots of little videos up. And if you go to the WASAG part of YouTube, you will find all these little videos. Now, one of them there, I did about a year ago on USB and USB drivers. It's over an hour long and it concentrates mostly on software aspects of USB. But something has emerged in the past couple of months. I've had 2 or 3 issues with something, and I thought I'm going to reiterate a little problem and walk you through it just to give you an example of what it is that I'm talking about. So I'm going to take a wee excerpt of that video and play it now. USB-C get mentioned. Because of people plugging in tongues upside down and breaking the sockets, it was decided to bring in a socket that you couldn't plug in upside down. And that's what USB-C is. It's about the size of a USB micro, but there's no polarity to it. There's no plugging it in upside down, which looks like a great idea. However, there's the socket. Right, you count how many copper connections are on there. Right, there's I think 24 on that one. Everything has to be duplicated on both sides of the socket, which means that the socket has a couple of dozen tiny fine wires on it, which makes it very, very fragile. Plugs in either way up. It's a very small part. It's got a very high density footprint, so it's fragile. Not everybody routes all the connections to that connector. If you think about it, getting the V plus to all the V pluses on there, and then the ground to all the grounds on there, and then the D pluses, is a routing nightmare for the guy designing the PCB. So what they sometimes do is just route half of it and hope that you plug the cable in the right road. So you get to a situation where my printer doesn't work. Okay, have you plugged it in? Aye. Have you tried plugging the cable in the other way up? But the cable's in. And you take it out, turn the cable, plug it in the other way, and it works. Or even worse, you get cables that are partially routed, whereby the cable works in one direction but doesn't work in the other direction. USB-C can be it's not a nightmare, but it's something that you have to be aware of. If you're encountering USB-C, then a lot of the logic that you already apply no longer applies. Cables might only work in one direction, they might not work in both directions. The thing, even though it plugs in both directions, one of them might work, the other one might not. So when you've got a USB-C device and a USB-C computer, it might be 6 or 7 goes to get them to talk to each other with the same cable, right? So it's not all improvement, let's put it that way. And there's PD. PD is something called power delivery, which I'm about to rant about because I reserve the right to rant about anything because Davey said I can. Now, I have had a couple of issues with USB recently, and so I was very, very fortunate to receive this from a friend and colleague. It's a USB-C tester. At either side of the board there is a USB-C socket, the full 24-pin USB-C socket. And there's 24 LEDs on it and a little battery that makes the circuit basically. You can't plug this into a computer, you can't plug it into a mobile phone, you can't do anything like that. What you do is you plug a cable into one end of it and a cable in to the other end of it. Now with a good USB-C cable, there's what it looks like. Basically the D plus and D minus are reversed, but the rest all light up all the way through. And that's great. There's a couple of problems with that cable though. That cable I had to buy, it cost me nearly a tenner. And it's got 24 wires in it, so it's about as thick as your pinky. And it's not a nice cable to use for connecting a phone or something. It's quite stiff. So I started looking at some of the USB-C cables that I've got lying about, and I'm going to go through one of them just to let you see what it is that I'm talking about here. This USB-C cable, I plugged in, and at one end of it, I marked the cable with an A on one side and a B on the other. And the other end of the cable, I put an X on one side and a Y on the other. I plugged A in there and X in there, and I get that selection of lights lighting up. If I turn the one end of the cable over, the B end, I get a different selection of lights lighting up. If I go back to A, but this time I turn the Y end over, I get a different selection of lights again. And if I take the B end to the Y end, I get a different selection of lights again. Good, you think? He's done. Not even close. If I turn the cable round and put the A end in the other end and the X in the other end, I get yet another pattern of lights. Turn the A over to B, another pattern. Change the X for Y, another pattern. And lastly, B to Y, an eighth pattern. Now this cable came with a mobile phone. And it turns out there's only one way of the 8 possible ways that that cable will work. And I'll bet you they get hundreds of these phones returned because they won't charge, or they get hundreds of them returned because the data won't flow over the cable. There's, if you're interested, there's the patterns that I get on the A side of the cable, and there's the patterns on the B side of the cable, and they're different from each other. So, in summary, if you've got a USB to USB-C cable, there are 8 different ways to connect it. I can't guarantee that more than one of them will work. It looks like a cable that plugs in either way around, and you think, yeah, this makes it really easy because that's what it was designed to do. But it doesn't necessarily, ain't necessarily so. The other thing that complicates matters enormously is that not all of these circuits are needed. So you may find that it plugs in and, oh, your phone charges. But because of the connections that have and haven't been made, the charger doesn't know it's connected to your type of phone, or your type of phone doesn't know it's connected to a good charger, or your type of phone doesn't know that it could be using a higher charging rate off of this charger, or your type of phone doesn't know that it can get data through the cable. So what the cable does will be restricted by the fact that it's plugged in the wrong way around. So you may find that if you've got a USB-C cable, and in the past 18 months, I've bought a mobile phone, a scanner, a printer, a 3D printer, all with USB-C cables. That's becoming the standard. The last computer I bought, you charge it by putting a USB-C cable into it to charge electricity into it, to charge the laptop. So these things are becoming ubiquitous. Please be aware, though, that the cables are complicated. They're much more complicated than they first look. They're designed to look really simple, but in reality, you should be just a wee bit wary of it. And that's all I have. Any questions, any more for any more?